Kira here from the Noise Room. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about objectivity and how it set me free. And it's kind of weird to say because I spent a lot of time and a lot of money going to acting classes, learning how to kind of do the opposite. And I wouldn't give that up for the world. So hear me out on this one. When I started really getting into a really good acting technique, I learned that taking things personally was a superpower in acting and in performing. The problem that I had with it though was that I took it too far, and I believed that having this rich emotional life could not only help me become a better actor, but it could also just kind of carry with me throughout my entire life and all of my day-to-day things. I thought this was the way of the world. I thought being emotional and having fervor for everything that I did was how I could be the true artist that I really was. That being passionate and letting the world around me affect me made me interesting. Just the idea that I'm a creative person and there's no reason to try to be someone I'm not and try to be all serious. The gift of subjectivity was a blessing in my personal writer's room, which is what I kind of call just where I write music and work on scripts and just like my space, right here in my space. It brought me to this emotional life that I never would have been able to understand, but everywhere else, it was a really big setback. Mostly where things needed to be really quick, really easy, really unbiased. Things like knowing my rates, things like knowing what environments I'd be able to work in and who I couldn't really work with. Knowing what my values were and knowing how to draw boundaries if someone crossed them. In these situations, my natural inclination was always to have a really emotional approach and to take everything personally. I was an actor, for God's sake, this is just how I was. I noticed that I started seeing this pattern in a lot of my friends as well, where we'd have trouble asking for basic things like how much we get paid and if we'd get paid working extra hours and will we be accommodated for certain things and while we were traveling and when would we get back home and how long would rehearsals be? We'd go through these interactions and come out of them not getting what we needed and feeling resentments even though we never really asked what we needed to begin with. We didn't really want to confront these issues because we just cared so much about having this emotional attachment to everything and thinking that we needed to live that way even outside of being on stage. Sure, our emotional availability was probably through the roof and we were probably performing really well and really in tune with ourselves, but lack of objectivity was actually making us unable to function practically and getting what we wanted. I really noticed this a lot at the beginning of when I started working with static and working with artists at our home studio. I started seeing more and more why having this objective approach was really important. I would talk to them about things like deliverables and pricing and expectations, and I found myself exhausted. I was emotionally attached to every interaction, and it made it really hard to solidify anything or be able to provide any clear answers. And it would take longer and longer for me to actually get to where I wanted to be, which was just to have artists collaborate. I even remember one day in particular, I was just emailing someone back and forth who was pushing back on pricing. And I was spending an hour on this one email just trying to lay out this argument of why we charge what we charge. And I was so angry and frustrated. And finally, I just had to turn to a mentor for help. So I explained the situation to him and I said, why doesn't this person value us? Why are they pushing back on money? I was saying how angry I was saying how frustrated I was. This person was trying to lowball us. And he sat there for a second and he just said something along the lines of, gosh, you're taking this so personally. And honestly, I was really taken aback. I was kind of upset that he wasn't siding with me. If you own a small business and if you work with people and if you've ever talked about money before, you'd understand that it can be really frustrating sometimes when people try to push back. But as soon as I felt the anger and the frustration that he wasn't defending me, I realized that he was absolutely right. So I had to kind of live in that for a little bit. I had to let time go on and I had to start seeing exactly what my mentor was talking about. So I noticed, I would get really emotional about a problem and I would see someone else going through the same thing, but work through the problem with this sense of logic and clarity and practicality that I just didn't understand. At first, I was just kind of are they not passionate people? Do they not care about things? Do they not put their heart and soul into everything? And then I soon realized that it's not about having passion or not. It's about choosing where to put that energy. I had been choosing to put my energy and emotion into something that really just required strategic thinking and clear communication and logical problem solving. There was really no other way to approach it other than that. I was wasting so much of this hard-earned energy that I could have been putting towards like writing music and working with other people, that I was spending so much time just trying to bargain and getting angry that people didn't understand me and just attaching emotion to things. And I realized that just having a clear, emotionless detachment from things was the power of objectivity. Another example of this is I was talking to a good friend one day over lunch about how I tend to avoid confrontation. I was saying how I really just don't like hurting people's feelings. I don't want to be rude. I don't want them to think that I don't like them, you know, all the people-pleasing stuff. We were having lunch and he grabbed his water bottle and he just put it right in between us. And he goes, "It's just this cup. Your feelings are just this cup on the table." And that made perfect sense to me. For me, working with objectivity when you're a creative person has been really hard. Placing something outside of myself has been really hard. For someone who's like us, if you're anything like me, you're in a really vulnerable career and we're constantly putting the most hidden parts of ourselves out into the ether and many times trusting collaborators to understand what we're trying to say and to synthesize it and help us get to where we want to be. The problem is the emotional baggage I was carrying into the business side of things, which is something that every performer has to go through whether you own a business or not. Focusing on logistics and seeing your self-worth, those are really important. And I had to learn to leave room for myself for that. I look back on my mentor's words and I look back on this idea of the cup on the table, and I recognize that once I started seeing things as outside of myself, as a cup on the table, once I start seeing questions and, you know, reasonable interactions as just fact, as just a thing. Once I started releasing my emotional attachment, I didn't need to feel the weight of adding feelings to everything. If payment isn't possible, you can't work together. If a show doesn't offer you compensation that you need, you can't accept the role. When you release the burden of emotion and look at things as logical, I found at least that I can start making space for my own self-care, for understanding what I'm worth, for understanding how I see myself, and creating boundaries for myself, as well as seeing myself at a value that I had never seen before. So I hope my experience with objectivity encourages you to ask yourself if you're utilizing objectivity in your artistry. I found it really hard, and I still do to this day, but even just recognizing that there is the need for objectivity and there is the need for factualness, has been really helpful in recognizing my value and understanding what I'm worth. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. Let me know what else you want to talk about down in the comments below, and let me know if you've ever experienced problems with objectivity. I've learned how to master the power of objectivity while being an emotional artist. I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, see ya!